Hello, San Diego Comic-Con. How's it going? My name once again is Marissa Hill, and I'm so excited to have this stellar, talented group of individuals on this panel today. So let's jump right in it, shall we? All right, starting with Stephanie. Stephanie, it's good to see you back here again, by the way. Stephanie was on our panel last year, and you continue to just amaze me, Stephanie, with all of the things that you're able to pile in on your day-to-day schedule. But I have been wondering this question that I have to ask. What was the very first show or movie you remember obsessing over as a fan? And how did that influence your approach to your work today?
I think the very first thing that I just remember, this is kind of like why I became an editor in the first place, was the movie Seven. In particular, the opening title sequence for that movie, which still holds up to this day. But if you watch it, I just was fascinated with the fact that you could, they tell so much about the story with no words at all. And so I was just fascinated with that idea, and I started playing with my VHS tapes and like splicing things together, not knowing that's editing at all. But that definitely like informed, and I didn't know that was a career path either, but it's something that definitely like informed what I do now. And something I still do is like I'll edit scenes and kind of watch them on mute just to see if they work. If the story is still like being told without hearing it at all. And I think that definitely came from just early days of that.
Seven, I never would have guessed that, Stephanie. Wow. I mean, one of my all-time favorites as well, but really cool and really inspiring. Andrew, you have worked on titles like Troll Hunters, one of my favorites, The Iron Giant, but Wondla is carving out its own unique space. What was your approach to building the world of Wondla in a way that would captivate both longtime fans as well as new viewers?
Ooh, good question. We were lucky in that we had Tony DiTerlizzi, the author of the books, with us pretty much throughout the whole thing, like from beginning to inception to final cut. So he was with us every step of the way. He had already laid out, did a lot of the groundwork of the world. But we wanted him with us as well because he's extremely collaborative, and we knew we were going to probably have to make some adjustments, to the world based on our story. And we wanted to be respectful of, his work, but also get his input. I think I harken back to like the time at Pixar where we had some principles. I wasn't that big there. I was just an animator, but some of the things I learned at Pixar with the films done there and world building. John Lasseter always says, make sure that the world you're building is a place you want to go to and visit. Make sure it's a place your audience would want to go to for like 2 weeks for vacation or something like that. So basically he's talking about appeal. So you want your appealing characters, you want your appealing world. I know there's a series of principles here. And then another thing you want to do is, of course, make all your decisions, as all of you guys know, like everything comes from story. What best serves the story? So you're making decisions based on that, on everything, lighting, music, etc. And so you definitely want to serve the story. Then another thing we did was, and I was learned from Pixar too, is you tell the story through your protagonist's eyes, and that's revealing the world through your protagonist's eyes. So your audience is seeing things for the first time just as your protagonist is, and that way you're bonding the audience with your protagonist. And so like these basic principles helped us, build like a very immersive world.
Well, speaking of worlds, I want to take this to James. James, you are a part of Minecraft, which most of you know is a world that is unlimited and open-ended. James, I would love to know, how did you craft such a tight narrative flow in the edit while still honoring that sense of player freedom as well as creativity and things that just fans would expect to see?
Yeah, that was a real challenge with this movie, because obviously there's an incredible fan base that made the game, and going into that, everyone across the board was very nervous about how do we serve that? You know, how do we honor that? And so really actually hearkening back to what Andrew was saying, it all comes from story. And the key moment for us in the process was actually figuring out who should narrate the prologue to the film, which is where, you know, we basically were taking care of all the world building. And there was an onus on us to get that absolutely right. Otherwise, we'd be eaten alive by the fans, basically.
A lot of pressure for you.
Yeah, so it was, I think we had something like 35 or 40 iterations going before we actually landed on, in fact, one of our producers landed on what seems like a really simple idea, which is let's have Jack Black, who's playing Steve, narrate the film. And it seems like an incredibly, duh, why didn't you guys figure that out? But actually, it was something that we'd gone round and round. There was another person who was supposed to be narrating. And once we settled into that path, if you like, everything just fell into place. And then he bookended the movie, so he was able to kind of convey the ethos behind the game. And you know, it's called a Minecraft movie for a reason. It's not the Minecraft movie because everybody's experience of playing the game is completely different, right? If any one of us in this room started to build something and someone told us the parameters for that, we would all interpret it completely differently. And so that was the essence that we tried to carry through into making the movie.
Well, I think everyone in this room probably knows Chicken Jockey now. If you don't, I don't know what to tell you. I know we were talking a little bit about that, James, as well. Talking about iconic franchises, Jeff, I would love to know between Snow White and Peanuts, they have such different tones in musical histories. How did you navigate honoring their iconic legacies while bringing your own fresh voice to the scores?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, it started with the Peanuts and sitting down at the piano to write a piece of music for what's going to be the sort of new version of the Peanuts on Apple TV for the first time. As you might imagine, that melody was stuck in my head that is probably in most of your heads now, Linus and Lucy, Vince Guaraldi, which I feel like is not only it's one of the most iconic score pieces ever, and it also just pieces of music that people listen to all the time.
Right now.
And for a lot, as a sort of recovering jazz musician, it's a lot of people's gateway into the jazz world, which so for me it's a very important piece of music. But just as the sort of animation style and the stories are updated, the music had to be updated as well. And so thankfully, by the time it came to Snow White, I had sort of under my belt developed the ability to sort of forget the sort of memories associated with all the music that comes with these projects and sort of honor what's there, but do something a little more 2025. And that was the brief on Snow White. The original score is a masterpiece. But at least the orchestral underscore part is very much of its time and fits beautifully with the amazing animation. That all changes when you have real actors on screen. So.
Well, thanks to you now, I whistle every time I clean.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
I just one little tidbit, which is, speaking of whistling, I'm also the whistling voice of Dopey.
Oh my gosh!
If you
How
hang
cool
out
is
for
that?
the credits, yeah.
Everyone, we have Dopey on stage here with us. Who knew? I love that. Johnny, I'd like to redirect things for the Penguin. I'm sure everyone in this room has watched this incredible series, but creating Gotham in epic moments like the flood in episode 3 must have been just such a huge challenge for you. What exactly was your strategy when it came to balancing spectacular effects with the intimate and emotional storytelling that it demands?
Yeah. Well, talking about worlds and things that are established already, we started this show having the Batman in place, right? That Matt Reeves had freshly created this world. And now we had Lauren LaFranc, our showrunner, who got to now write 8 hours worth of beautiful story in the same world. So there was a lot to sort of, figure out there. We had this gritty world, and then all of a sudden we had all these new characters. And, one thing I think we can all agree on, if you've seen the show, one of the defining things is the grayness of all the characters, right? Like for Oz and for Sophia, episode to episode, you're not sure who you're rooting for, right? It almost flips back and forth, and it twists you inside. But then there's Victor, right? And Victor is the heart of the show, really. And so he's like the protagonist. And, he's a person that we're meant to, we've just been thrown into this series, just like Victor's been thrown into this relationship with Oz. He doesn't know whether to trust him. He doesn't know whether Sophia's really good or bad. So we are Victor in this story. And so really early on, we have to get the audience feeling what Victor is feeling. So in episode 3, at the start of it, we revisit the flood events that we saw in the Batman, but this time not flooding Madison Square Garden or Gotham Square Garden, which is about thousands of people, and it's the election. But this is like just a teenager, a kid, that we all were at one point, and he storms out of his family's house, mouthing off to his parents, and then next thing you know, he's watching this horrific thing happen in front of him, and the seawall collapses and the water rushes through and destroys his apartment building. And the tricky thing about this sequence was, one, not to make it exactly like the film. We had to take a different point of view of the same event. And we realized this is all about Victor. This it's no longer about the Riddler and the politics of all that and his motives. Who cares, right? It didn't matter to Victor. The only thing that matters to Victor is that his parents are at the end of the block. And Scott, it's like almost emotional thinking about it. And so when we crafted this sequence, we had to really be careful that the spectacle of a flood, right, which we've seen in so many big summer films and so many shows, where almost like the trailer shot is like, oh my God, look at this building collapsing and these explosions going off, and that's like the thing that makes you go wow and cool. But really, we had to be careful not to elicit that emotion, but instead to elicit like pure sorrow and tragedy, that you are all of a sudden Victor. So the strategy in that was make everything from his point of view. And so every shot, if you watch the sequence again, you'll see that we basically become Victor, and there's this great shot where the camera cranes over his shoulder as he gets up to see the explosion, and we kind of overtake him to literally become his point of view. And we storyboarded every shot of this sequence by hand. Great artist Chris Anderson, who's probably here at Comic-Con somewhere, or in this audience maybe. But we knew how important it was. We knew how important that this could not make you smile. It had to make you sad. And we went through so many versions of the sequence of, fine-tuning the balance of how much do we cut to Victor, how much do we cut to the flood. And then we played with shots like ground level, seeing people in the street and the flood coming, and then we cut all that. We said, no, let's keep it from his point of view. The camera doesn't do any kind of flying moves or crane moves or dollies or anything. Every shot on that flood is just where he was on that balcony to see only things he could have seen.
It was so well done. I mean, actually, anyone from New York out here? Because we're getting some real life floods, actually. There too, kind of similar in its own way. But I now want to direct this back to Stephanie. Stephanie, it was so good seeing you, by the way, at the Daredevil Born Again premiere. I got the privilege to be in a theater with Stephanie for Daredevil Born Again, and the audience was going crazy for that first episode. It was so good, and also just so amazing to know that you were a part of that project, Stephanie. But what I want to get into is how basically do you think, with this deeply invested and interested fan base with Daredevil's gritty tone and intense action, how easy was it for you to kind of balance those signature fight scenes that you see throughout with the emotional and psychological depth that takes place that the story explores?
So for me, I was a massive fan of the Netflix series and was so just thrilled to be a part of this one. And it's a show that I think is so known for its fight sequences, but when you really look at it on like a granular level, fight sequences are so short, and it's really about all of the emotion that leads up to it to kind of like create that release when you see the fight sequence. So a lot of times, or most of the time, what I'll do is I'll work as hard as I can on developing those sort of like character and story arcs that lead up to the fight sequences. So for example, in episode 6 of Daredevil, there's a huge fight sequence between Daredevil and Muse that's intercut with Fisk beating up Adam in the dungeon. That's kind of when both of those characters are like coming back into their true natures. But the whole season prior to that, they've been fighting, coming back to their true natures, right? So it's like so much of the episodes prior was about building out those moments. Matt needs to feel like he's coming to terms with losing his closest friend. Fisk is like trying to be the mayor, trying to like fit into these mayoral duties, his day-to-day mundane life, having kids sing "We Built This City" at him, like all of these things that are just not in his kingpin nature at all. And so you really needed to feel both of these characters like really wanting to come into their true nature, but fighting against that, so that it's almost like a pressure cooker. And once it hits those fight sequences, it's like a release. Another example is the Bullseye Poindexter character. He's so layered, and by the end of episode 8, he's pointing a gun, and you don't know who he's pointing it at. The only reason you don't know who he's pointing it at is because all of the sequences before then, when you see him just in regular emotional scenes, you're kind of seeing this layered person who's conflicted in so many ways, and almost like sympathetic in a weird way, even though he's also like a monster at the same time. So it's like you kind of just had to build out those to feel that moment at the end of 8, if that makes sense.
Yeah, had us on a nice little roller coaster. It was a fun ride. Michael, next question I want to direct towards you with Agatha All Along, which features some really unique instrumentation. Can you talk a little bit about how you chose the specific instruments and sounds that give the songs its distinctive character?
Yeah, so I think, as Johnny and Stephanie were both talking about morally gray characters, and I guess Agatha morally purple in this instance, she's not a traditional superhero, and that was something early on that we discussed was, there's these traditional sounds and instruments you associate with Marvel comic book heroes, and our initial demos, included those like trumpets and French horns and the epic percussion, and it just didn't fit her vibe at all. And so we just kind of went back to the tool shed and started experimenting and found this, for her, and not just Agatha, but the other characters as well, that they all sort of like walk this line of having this more kind of eerie ensemble of strings and trombones, and we could do all these like really low textural, bendy notes and slides and things that you just don't traditionally hear with like a normal orchestral palette, and then that sort of served as our like magical foundation. And then we started including other instruments as, each episode sort of explores different genres. And so we're able to flavor, what we, have from our foundation, and have these like blend of processed woodwinds and electronics. We have like these psychedelic guitars when they kind of go into this, trippy recording studio. And so, building this sort of strong, sort of solid level that, allows us to, follow each the Coven as they sort of explore these different worlds and really like lean into those genre shifts, and I think just had a lot of fun with that.
Anything with magic, so much fun. What can I say? We did a little seance circle before we came up on the panel today as well, everyone. It was fun. Nikhil, music is such a powerful world-building tool when it comes to fantasy. How did you use sound, especially in pieces like The Hills of Tanchico, to bring Robert Jordan's universe to life in a fresh way for fans and newcomers alike?
Totally. Yeah, I completely agree. I think fantasy, especially world building, is such an important part of the experience, right? The characters, the way they interact with the world. And music is kind of a language to express that. And for me, I came to the Wheel of Time series as a fan, basically. I'd started off reading the books. They were like my gateway to fantasy. And in fact, it's funny, I'd read all 15 books, and they're all like door stoppers, right? They're massive, like 2,800 characters, and pretty massive world. So daunting anyways to tackle musically. But I'd written this like orchestral love letter to the series, and that's kind of what eventually got me hired on the show. So, world building is something that I'm very passionate about. And when it came to writing this original song called The Hills of Tenchiko, Tenchiko is a particular geographical location in the series, but the way the brief was kind of described to me by production was they wanted like a body bar song, but the actual lore of this place and what the song signifies is actually thousands of years old and has darker undertones. But it's like when a song gets morphed throughout history, it kind of becomes something else. Like I think about Ring Around the Rosie, it started during the Black Plague, and then now it's a children's nursery rhyme. So it was a similar kind of idea. So it was a lot of juggling that emotional aspect of it, but then also, production had described, we want it to sound like a sea shanty. We want it to have kind of very organic, earthy instruments. We want it to have Malaysian and Asian, South Asian instruments and African instruments. Have fun, and I basically had the morning to do it. So no pressure, but only pressure, right? But I think also that's where the world building knowledge really came in handy, because that was one of my favorite geographical locations in the Wheel of Time, and it was about figuring out like, what's the main thing and then what's the other thing? The main thing was the sea shanty that everyone can sing along at a bar. But then there are these other instruments that you want to kind of combine in a way that doesn't feel like anything's overshadowing each other. So I picked like some Malaysian plucked instruments, and I actually doubled them with mandolin, because then you can't really tell where it's from. That's what Robert Jordan did so well in crafting his world, is you never knew where one culture ended and the other one began. So it was about layering things smartly so that you go, what is that instrument? It kind of sounds like it could be this one thing, or maybe it's something else, and you don't quite know. And then it feels like it belongs to the Wheel of Time universe, not like, oh, we're in this geographical location now. So that was kind of part of it. And then some of the African instrumentation I used as percussion. So again, it kind of guides it along, but it's not necessarily overshadowing the body bar song aspect of it. So there was a lot of stuff like that we did throughout the show, but this was kind of a fun way to really kind of tie all those things together, I guess you could say.
Sounds like so much fun to play with all those cool instruments. My
It's
goodness.
like a musical playground. Yeah.
Literally, it's like limitless. That's so crazy. The next question I want to open up to the group, so feel free to answer. Is there a moment in your work on these projects, whether a shot or a musical phrase or an edit or a visual effect, that you feel particularly captures your style or artistic voice?
I feel like for me, the entirety of episode 8, that's the gala episode, because it was a really fun opportunity where everyone was just like, okay, Steph, just run with it, like try all the things, like be weird, and so it kind of just gave me a window to like explore all the things that I possibly could, and a lot of it ended up in the actual episode. Like you hear the music get super warped at times. Just a lot of just fun trying things and seeing what stuck. Lots of playing with color. And also that episode was like super, super collaborative. So like every single person in every single department, I feel like showcased like their A game on it. So I would say that episode.
Is that also pretty common where they give you the leniency to kind of just be free in that sense
No,
when it comes to edits?
It was a dream. And I think because on our show, we had kind of an overhaul halfway through. It was just they just kind of gave us like special reign to kind of go in and play with it and see what worked and what didn't. And I was just thrilled that a lot of it stayed.
Wow, love that. Anyone else?
I don't want to rain on Dopey's parade here, but I did the chicken sounds for Chicken Jockey.
Oh man,
Just
Dopey
saying.
versus the chicken.
So
And this speaks to your creative vision.
this
now?
is my creative vision.
No,
That was literally the
Sorry, you dropped the gloves now.
the highlight of my career. And I also did the chicken in Borat when he throws the bag outside the megachurch. That was me. So
There's a whole chicken.
that's it. It's a chicken thing going on.
Okay.
That's it.
Amazing.
That's what I got.
So chickens have been a part of your life
Chickens
for a
have
long
been a
time, I
theme
see.
throughout my.
Theme throughout your life. I
yeah,
love that.
Trying to get them in somewhere. Yeah.
But I think it's difficult because, you know, in I think all of our positions, we have to serve a lot of different masters per se. You have to serve the story. You have bosses that have what they want, you know, and you're working on the backs of a host of very creative, talented people on top of that, while you're trying to insert your own voice, your own, you know, ideology and thoughts and things like that. And then sometimes these opportunities do open up where you get a chance to do that, where and everybody's like, I don't know what to do, and then give it to me, I'll be right back. And then you get a chance to do something like that, and it's rare. And
Do you prefer to have that freedom, or do you prefer to just kind of have it outlined and someone specifically saying, hey, listen, like this is exactly what it needs to be like versus
No,
free
I
for all?
much prefer the freedom. Yeah, yeah. And I'm lucky in that I've worked in places where they have allowed me and the crew that freedom under people. Like on Troll Hunters, you know, I worked under Guillermo del Toro, and he was, you know, the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and he's like, you know, screw the writers, I want to see what the directors can do. You know, like, okay, great. And that, you know, he gives you freedom to like voice what you want. And Pixar as well was very artist friendly, allowing, you know, trying to promote and allow the artists the freedom to express themselves.
Fans love Easter eggs. I know everybody in this room is hoping to probably hear and learn a couple Easter eggs at Comic-Con. Did you or your team sneak any fun surprises into projects that you can share with us? And something that only the most dedicated fans might actually catch? Without getting in trouble, of course, I know.
This is, I don't know if it's an Easter egg or not, but it is intentional. Spoilers, but at the very end of the series, Oz finally gets to have his dream and his promise to his mother of having a penthouse apartment, right? So they're in this grand hotel. It's the very last shot of the show. That hotel has this distinct red neon sign, and we made sure that building is visible in the skylines in every episode leading up to the end. So you don't know what that is, and if you watch it again, you might notice it because it's just like any hotel, but it is meant to foreshadow where he'll end up at the end of the show.
In researching, writing the score for Snow White, you know, sort of reading and a lot about how they made the original, and one of the things that came up is how they made the sound of Grumpy's pump organ in their cottage in the original, and it was Jim McDonald, who was sort of revolutionary sound guy, who did all of those early Disney films, got a bunch of people in a room with whiskey jugs and ocarinas, which is sort of like a flute made out of a gourd, to make the sound of Grumpy's organ. You know, so back in the day, they would have had to have sort of 10 people there and go, okay, you, that kind of thing, to record it on one piece of tape. And because this is Disney, I thought, I don't know, let's see if they still have these jugs. And I emailed them, and they did.
Wow, where were those
So
jugs hidden?
the
Archived in
director
a
and I
garage.
got to go into a studio and toot into these sort of 6 or 7 enormous 100-year-old whiskey jugs. We probably have lead poisoning from whatever the paint is, and ocarinas. And it features briefly in the score, but then also when they're playing the organ inside the cottage, those are the original jugs being tooted in 2024.
That's so cool. Where did Disney store all of that? Like, where?
Well, you know, they have an archive department, and
Wow.
there was like a real amazing character who manages all of these
Need to meet this
archival
archive person.
objects. Yeah, I know. He was really, if you can imagine in your head like the sort of most amazing version of what a Disney archivist could be, that's who it is.
That's who
Yeah,
it looks
so,
like?
Yes.
I bet it was the first request to find those jugs, of course. Maybe somebody else asked for them, I don't know. A little dusty, of course.
Yeah, they were.
Anyone else had any Easter eggs hidden within their projects?
Yeah.
Time?
In the Wheel of Time, I felt very fortunate that, the lead composer, Lorne Balfe, really gave us agency to kind of run with ideas. So there's a kind of a spoiler for season 2, if that's all right. But there's a main character named Egwene who gets collared and enslaved by this Shan Chan civilization. And it's kind of a dark scene. So, the idea was like, if we take this, because Egwene had her own theme and it was very vocally driven. And it kind of represented her innocence, especially kind of where she starts off in the show. And so one of my ideas was to take her vocal and kind of warp it and twist it so that it's kind of there in the background, but it's almost, you have to really listen to hear it. But it's those things that you're not necessarily listening and it's telegraphed, but it's something that you feel whether you're overtly hearing it or not. So there were instances like that, I think, that we tried to take a theme and go, it represents one thing, what if we twisted it and changed it to represent the darker side of that thing that could be twisted, so.
That's so cool. Love voice warping. Sounds like so much fun. Now I want to get into a little bit of humor. What's the funniest or most unexpected fan reaction you've ever seen about your project? Any funny moments?
There's one line in Daredevil where Heather's like having an argument with Matt in the kitchen, and she's like, Daredevil didn't save me, I saved me. And when I was cutting that scene, like I had no idea, like to me I was like, oh, it's just a scene, right? But it became like like all the Daredevil memes all of a sudden were like Heather saying like, Daredevil didn't save me, I saved me, or whatever. So I just thought that was entertaining.
I love that. And it became a meme everywhere.
Yeah,
That's
the whole meme.
hilarious. Wow.
I think it's fun tapping into the Marvel fan base on social media. After Agatha came out, seeing all these videos of fans talking about the music or finding different Easter eggs. And one fan actually like made this giant Google Doc that's like 100 pages long, and he analyzed every single leitmotif in the show. And he sent it to me, and I was like, this is like pretty accurate. Like, it's insane. And actually, I have it on my Instagram. You can check it out. Like it's pretty crazy. And then just seeing like other fan videos of like people dancing or all the remixes of the Ballad of the Witch's Road and stuff like that. I think it's really cool seeing the interactive aspect of that.
Definitely done a few of the dances myself. It's online somewhere for everybody to view.
It was very similar actually for the Wheel of Time. Is like the fan base is so into the series, and some of them have read these 15 books like 10, 20 times. So you get an idea of how excited people are, and to see their favorite characters come to life on screen, and then the music and working on the Hills of Tenchiko is kind of one of those moments where I feel like it's a conversation between somebody who creates something, and you try to make it the best you can, like do justice to the world, but you don't really know what it's going to feel like until it goes out into the world. And then the fans take it and they run with it. And like I've been seeing fans sending me videos of them singing along at like various conventions, and one fan actually even made me this shirt, the Hills of Tenchiko, so I had to wear it, represent.
What a cool shirt.
But yeah, no, it's amazing to see them respond to it too, because then it's not yours anymore, It's everyone's. Like it's all of yours. So
We gotta get a merch store set up for you.
Yeah, I think
That's
so.
a really cool tee. I need one. As far as advice goes, I know a lot of you in here are probably maybe hoping to do with what one of our panelists, at least editing or creative directing, whatever it may be, if you want to be in film or TV. They have all the advice that they could potentially offer you here in this moment. I'm not sure we're going to have too much time for Q&A, but I would love to open it up to all of you to give some advice to those who are looking to be in this world that you're all in.
Maybe say yes to as much as you can early on. I did that a lot with doing student short films for free. you know, all the way to just a few years ago saying yes to a director asking if I can whistle a little tune into a phone that, you know, ends up playing in a movie all around the world.
So it was the whistle that,
It was the
that made it
whistling,
happen.
Yeah, but you know, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do Snow White without scoring a bunch of student short films, you know, 15 years ago, and basically to this point saying yes, you know.
Saying yes, that's great advice.
I feel like also just to push through the imposter syndrome, because I think all of us feel it. I still feel it every day. But it's so important to just like always push through that and like don't be afraid to try all the things and reach out to people, and don't be afraid to, like, something that I do is like I'll see maybe something that I really like and I always will be like, oh, I wonder who edited that, and see if you can find, you know, even if it's just like their social media or something, like don't be afraid to reach out, because I feel like in general people in post are all very friendly and like talking about posts, and you just in doing that you build like kind of an organic, you know, organic network, I guess, a little bit, organic friendships, and maybe they could guide you a little on the way too.
Yeah, and to build on that, like, it's a small world. This community, film and television and, you know, cinema, it's more than you think. And so, you know, it may seem daunting, like there's so much out there, but really make friends, you know, build connections, because it's likely, you know, not as far as you think. And I think one of the creeds that we all go by, especially in television when you're running for so long, and we always say it's not to sprint, TV is a marathon, is just be a good person and stick to your morals and your ethics and your human side of you, because at the end of the day, when we spend so much time with each other, it kind of comes down to how, you know, that it comes down to working with people you want to work with, that you want to be around, that you want to commune with and have lunches together, have late dinners together. And so, you know, yes, there's talent, but being a good human being really takes you pretty far.
I'd just like to add to that wherever you are in your career, and you know, all of us here, I'm sure, have had ups and downs where it's going great and then suddenly it's not going great. It's like set some benchmarks for yourself and then try, you know, this is a craft, right, what we all do. It's like just constantly be trying to learn techniques, tricks, you know, editing. What I do is it's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and it's like there's a lot of things that you can not necessarily be exactly where you think you should be in your career, but you can still be practicing those same ideas. And that's something that people who mentored me taught me, and it stood me in really, really good stead.
Love that.
I would say one thing I've learned, especially lately, is the power of you know, cultivating your own voice. I think it's very easy to want to sound like your heroes, you know, and that's an important step, I think, when one is first starting out. And you kind of start to wean out those influences as you go, and hopefully something comes from, you know, your own personal experience, your own life experience. So we're all very different, and we all have something different to bring to the table. And for me, personally, like, a turning point was my love of reading. And I always joked, oh, every time I want to, you know, work on, you know, read a book, I have to work on some music deadlines or something, and vice versa. Like, what if I could bring both of those things into one thing? Wouldn't that be the coolest thing in the world? So that's really what led to The Wheel of Time. Another friend of mine, Siddharth Khosla, who wrote the score for Only Murders in the Building, had mentioned to me he had gotten that from working on an album that he was a very personal album and stuff. And so I think it's like finding these other things that you're passionate about and bringing them into what you love to do can help you bring a different slant to it than, you know, than anyone else, which is a very valuable thing to have.
Yeah, on top of that, I would say try things that make you uncomfortable too. You know, don't just stick within your comfort zone. Push yourself, and I call it, like, probably not my own analogy, but adding tools to your toolbox. You know, like, I didn't think I understood story enough, so I started taking some writing courses, and I'm not a great writer, but I learned a lot, you know, from that process, and that helped when I was directing, you know, and with directing story and building story. So just look for maybe some weaknesses or something you're worried or afraid of trying, and go for it. You know?
Yeah, I think just kind of jumping on that, like, yeah, don't be afraid to listen or experience new art, new reading books, like you never know where these influences come from, and just, pushing yourself to, experience a type of story that you've never enjoyed before, or listening to a genre of music that you've never listened to before. And I think you'll find little nuggets of wisdom or things that you might enjoy and find valuable, that you can carry with you.
All such great advice. Now I want to ask one of my favorite questions, but sometimes I know some of you can't answer. But any future projects that you're working on that you can talk a little bit about for the near future? Anything?
Daredevil season 2.
Ooh, Daredevil season 2, everyone. That's
I
exciting.
can't tell you anything about it.
Shucks, that's all right. At least we know there's a second season coming out. Anyone else working on some special projects that you can talk about?
I'm working on an indie feature about this underwater clown from Texas named Glurpo.
That's
Look
fun.
him up. It's pretty crazy.
Anyone else?
I'm actually working on a game right now that my wife is producing. So that's really cool. We get a chance to work with each other. We're in studio setups across the way, and we're Slack messaging each other, of course, as one does. But it's like a Sailor Moon inspired, like very inspired by like 90s Japanese anime stuff. So it's quite fun to dive into a very musically different world.
Very exciting. Such different projects from what you worked on already previously, which is really cool. Of course, Daredevil, though. I mean, I expected you to be on the next season, so really excited to see what your work will look like, Stephanie. We do have a couple more minutes, so I'm going to see if we can grab a mic, actually. Andrew will grab one, and we have a couple questions, or time for a couple questions. If anyone has anything to ask, please ask away.
Hi, thank you all for your time today and all your really candid answers. I know for a lot of creatives, you make something and you look at it and you can't help but be critical. I should have done this, I could have done that. How long does it take you from when you've made something to when you can watch it and actually enjoy it?
Loaded question, Carlo.
Never?
I would say sometimes never. Yeah, there's films I worked on in 2005 that I just haven't revisited because I know it's going to bug me. I know there's a whole load of stuff that I would want to do differently now. So, but I think that's part of the process, right? That's just part of being a creative. It's never perfect. It's never, ever going to be perfect. And the process is learning to let go. The thing I find hardest is when a project comes towards the end and we're hurtling towards picture lock and everyone's like, we got to get this done. I'm like, but we're not ready yet. But you have to get it done. And it's like letting go and then letting everyone else, all the other departments, sound, music, do their job. And then that brings it home, so.
Yeah, my friend and editor, Torben Bullock, always says, don't let the perfect get in the way of the good. That's where sometimes you just got to step back and let it go.
Yeah. Good enough.
But I think also being self-critical is maybe just an evidence between, there's like a gap between your taste and your ability, which I actually think is a very good thing. You're setting yourself, it means you're setting yourself a high bar, and you've sort of created a scenario where you're going to keep working to try to hit that bar. If you leave 100% satisfied with something you're doing, you're maybe not setting your bar high enough, I try on all my projects to maybe give myself an unrealistically high expectation for myself. But then no, it's okay. I try not to get depressed about being critical of my own work, just knowing that there's a sort of taste to ability gap there.
For me, once it's gone out into the world, right? Like I used to say to myself, like, my art isn't really art till someone else has looked at it, right? Because then it's been interpreted, it's been affected someone even in some small way. So now with all the like YouTube reaction videos, it's been amazing seeing other people experience the show, right? I think all of us, it's a very new thing. In TV, we never had that till recently. And now, you can watch it with other people. It's like when you work on, if you do a film and then you try to go to a theater that's full and sit in the back row just to feel how everyone else is feeling. I think then there's a sense of finality to it once other people have experienced it.
As creative people, when you're in the process of putting together what you're directed to do or think about, do you remember one of those aha moments where you go, oh my gosh, I should have saw that right away, or oh my gosh, that's going to really work in this story or this film? Do you have those aha moments you could share?
I mean, I feel like I feel like that happens on every project, especially if you're stepping away from it for a little while. Especially in TV, you might be working on other episodes, and then you come back to something, and you're like, wait, I should repurpose this scene to be about something completely different. I know in episode 4 of Daredevil, there's a lot of scenes like that. But there's one sequence at the very end where Matt goes up to the rooftop and he's like playing with his billy clubs, and that used to only be Matt up on the roof. And we decided after like just a long period away from it that maybe that should be intercut with Fisk going down into the basement when we kind of reveal Adam, because it's both of them coming into their true nature ultimately. Or like playing with the idea of coming back into their true nature, so it felt like there were parallels there. But the only reason we came to that was like we had stepped away from that episode for several months, and like we came back and we're like, wait a second, these shouldn't be individual scenes, they should play together.
And to build on that objectivity, like we can be working on a scene for months, and then someone in the office just in the doorway just looks and says, oh, what about that thing? And then we missed it for months, and then we realized, oh my goodness, we did not see that thing in the corner. It's fresh eyes. That's why it is a team effort. Seriously, like it cannot be judged. It cannot be envisioned by one person.
I feel like it's always something really obvious too.
Love those aha moments. Well, thank you so much for those amazing questions. And thank you to all of you who took part in today's panel. I want to give a huge thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to Andrew, James, Jeff, Johnny, Michael, Nikhil, and Stephanie. Looking forward to all your future projects. Thank you for sharing the little nugget as well. And as far as other thank yous, I'd like to thank Impact 24. Thank you, Andrew, and Comic-Con for putting this amazing panel together. And be sure to tag us with #FanFavorites and at Impact24PR if you took any footage today. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Comic-Con.